The power that reaches my hairdryer so that I can look so stunningly beautiful comes to me from power sources which are really, really strong compared to my hairdryer. So something must happen. It's called transformation or transforming. In other words, the electricity, it's the wrong voltage when it leaves Hinkley Point Power Station for me to use here. I'd be fried and probably the house and the neighbourhood with it. So it must go down. It must be stepped down. So some transformations step down the power. Other transformations are about stepping up the power. And that is the kind of transformation that I'd like to share with you from Romans chapter 12 and verse 2 today. An example of stepping up power transformation would be by the transformer bumblebee. And a bumblebee you would normally see just pootling down the road as a Volkswagen Beetle car. But come a human crisis, Bumblebee transforms into an alien robot superhero who goes around solving problems. And that's an upward stepping of power, a transformer who suddenly becomes what is needed in the moment. And that's much more the kind of transformation that Paul has in mind when he says to the Romans, the church in Rome in chapter 12 and verse 2 as we have it, do not be conformed any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. To come to this point, Paul has spoken of the majesty and wonder, the unsearchable riches of God. Rose, thank you for reading that so brilliantly in a woodland setting. What a great setting for that reading, and your comments so to the point, because Paul is changing now in his letter. He's coming from sort of background information as to how to understand the human predicament to how we're going to live out our following of Jesus. Transformation is what he's calling for, and transformation is a feature of life. All living things are caught up in transformation. You can think of the obvious ones, the bird to the egg, the caterpillar to the butterfly, and one which Paul uses, which is stirring in the soil even now. Paul uses it to talk about resurrection. We're going to actually come back to that image. It's from 1 Corinthians chapter 15. Much later down the year, we're going to come back to that one. But he says, isn't it engaging how you have this very dead looking thing, a seed, and you plant it in the ground and up comes a wheat plant. And it's the same individual. It's been transformed. And you go, wow, look at that. It started off like a little dead pebbly thing, stuck it in the ground, and it's been absolutely transformed and now is producing a crop. And how fascinating. All living things transform. You're surrounded by it. It's happening right now. As in Britain, we begin to feel the first stirrings of spring. Up to now, Paul has been introducing the Romans to themes which we've all talked about at one time or another. How, for example, he says, and this is the first couple of chapters, but it kind of stays throughout the letter, how all human beings have a double truth about them. We are all innately connected to God and feel that innate connection with God. And attached to that fact, we have an instinctive urge to participate in what is good, what contributes to the common good and to the well-being of communities. We get all the bad news in the news headlines, but look out at your own community wherever you are in the world, and you'll see, no, most people are actually showing that we have a strong urge to do something good with our lives, and actually showing on a daily basis almost that we have this innate connectedness with God. And yet, says Paul, and you and I know this very often from our own experience, there is a different stream flowing in the human being, a desire not only to be connected to God, but to break the connection and lose contact with God. A desire not only to participate in the good, but a drive to be quite selfish that leads to harm and hurt and everything wrong in the world. And so human beings are this curious, conflicted being, which both has the connection and the desire to break the connection, has the goodness and the capacity to be very ungood in some of our behaviours. And that's the position we're in. Paul says, ancient Israel received the laws of Moses to help them manage this conflict, this inner conflictedness of human beings. That you limit the harm you can do, and the law was designed to limit that, but the law was also designed to promote engagement with God and the connection. But as Jesus pointed out in his tree image, the problem lies deeper. And although you might be able to contain things a little bit with some good rules won't cut it in the end. You need a recreation, you need a restart, you need a reboot, you need an upcycling, you need a renewing of the human being, you need a deeper change. So Jesus said, it's in the very nature of a grapevine to produce grapes. It's not in the nature of a thorn bush to do that. And similarly, we as human beings, we live out that fundamental nature that we have. That if you wanted a thorn bush to produce grapes like a grapevine, you would have to change it, transform it, and its inner nature. We would see it as genetic engineering or something, where you would change the very core being of the plant. Otherwise, it's going to go on being a thorn bush and it'll never produce grapes. And what his point is, which of course is impossible. So what is needed is for God to help us with a transformation. And friends, it's very plain how much humanity needs this transformation. While the planet is in crisis, Russia and the West square up to each other as if what we need is a war or something. I mean, how irrelevant, how nothing to do with the 21st century is that? How blah blah is that? It's a ridiculous waste of time we don't have and resources that urgently need to be channeled to the enemy that Russia and the West and everybody else are facing. We need a transformation of how business is done on planet Earth, how politics are carried out on planet Earth. That need is becoming more and more urgent. So there could be no better time, I suppose, than for Christians to pay very good attention to what Paul is driving at here. He says, stop being taught by a lost world how to live your life. Don't conform, because it's not taught you how to live your life. It's taught you how to lose it and waste it. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Well, of course, it's impossible for me to renew my mind. I can do some work on it, but I can't transform its fundamental nature. Who can? Well, the answer is the God of the unsearchable, the judgments and whose paths are beyond finding out. The God who is my creator can do a recreation of me, and I can talk to God. And that, says Paul, that's the entire reason Jesus came into the world, was born as one of us to live and die for us, raised again, to open up to us the transformation that is the possibility through the work of God's own Spirit in our inner being, and transform the inner plant and therefore transform the fruit that is produced, changing the very mind, the very heart of the human being, so that how we function is practically much better. So the first thing, well, it's impossible, so I must dispose myself to receive my Creator's help. I need to talk to God about this. I need to say, do you know what, Lord? I need you to change me, and I'm going to work on it with you if you'll change me. And the good news of the gospel is Jesus is saying, follow me. That's what I'm here for. Just exactly to help that change be created. Not being conformed to what the world has taught you. Let me teach you. So the first thing is which way you're facing, how you're positioned. You're disposed to be available to God's Spirit, changing your attitudes, the way you see everything and the way you understand things, the way you feel about things, and therefore the way you behave. Deep, upward recycling, upcycling, upward transformation, a transformation of your mind. In biblical culture, heart and mind, much the same thing. And we still talk as if our hearts could be good or this or that, knowing fine well that actually there's not a physical location for those things in our chest cavity. But it's a great way of speaking. We understand what's being said. So the first thing is that disposition. I've decided I'm up for that transformation, so I'm going to follow Jesus. If I'm going to follow Jesus, second thing comes in. I need to be a student of Jesus. Nobody can do your homework for you, folks, right? You don't have to be academic. You don't have to be cleverer than anybody else. All human beings can be students of Jesus, and that's what following Jesus is all about. That's where it starts. You need to study Jesus, which means you need to give Jesus your time and attention, which means you need to read the teachings and behavior and nature and character of Jesus. There are some hazards to that which are common. One is thinking the preacher will do it for you. Nobody can do your learning for you. Only you can learn. Preachers may be able to help or to hinder, and they'll do both. But you need to be a follower of Jesus, not just watch and listen to a preacher sometimes who is. Then you need to watch out for the human, that other side to the human nature, which will tend to make you a bit indifferent, can't be bothered, a bit lazy, can't find the time. Other things seem more pressing, more important. I never actually quite get round to spending enough time studying Jesus and doing my homework. The third thing, so there's the attitude, the approach, the basis from which you're going to go, God, I need your help. I need to be transformed by the renewing of my mind. Will you help me, please? And so for my part, I'm going to study you. I'm going to follow Jesus. I'm going to do my homework. I'm going to learn Jesus constantly. I'm going to study and learn Jesus. I'm going to learn Jesus from Jesus for myself through the Gospels. And then I suggest the third one, because things like this come in threes, is great, if you like. So, and that is a pearl of wisdom, which Jesus shares, which I think is often overlooked, because he also said, not only will your behaviour flow out of what's in your heart and mind, so that's how you'll live, that's how the politics will end up being done in the world, by what's going on inside people. That's how you'll live your life that you've been given, by what's going on inside your heart and mind. So that's where that's the key point of transformation. But actually, you can also help that process of changing your mind, being transformed rather than conformed, by how you practice. And what I think he says, if you invest yourself properly in the things of the kingdom of heaven, your heart will eventually follow it. And I think, if you do pattern your life a bit, your mind will catch up. I taught myself to swim as a child that way. I couldn't do it. I kept not being able to do it, but I kept repatterning, retrying, learning and learning, until one day my brain knew how to swim this body, and it's took over, and I've been able to swim ever since. If you just keep at it, and you start shaping your lifestyle, eventually you'll own the lifestyle that you shape. Pay attention to that, one's really important. Close with a positive feedback loop. You hoped I would, didn't you? So what I mean by the positive feedback loop is this. If you and me and everybody else in our churches are working on this principle that Paul says, being transformed, God's going to do it, God's Spirit transforming me, being transformed by the renewing of our minds, then the more we're focusing on that, the more we can help our churches become transformed churches, which are more Jesus-like. And the more we help our churches to become transformed Jesus communities, the better our churches will be for all of us to be transformed by the renewing of our minds. So each of us working on it individually and knowing that we must actually do something to make our church more conformed to Christ and not conformed to the world, a transformed church, then the more we're doing that and the more we're doing this, they will each feed the other. And it's a positive feedback loop, and the result is going to be absolutely awesome. Here it is, folks, Romans chapter 12 and verse 2, search it for yourself. Don't be conformed to a world that's lost its way and has taught you wrongly. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind, and then you'll become an agent of transformation for the good of the world as well. God bless you, and thanks for listening.